Remember the spring of 2020, the first lockdown, clap for carers. We're all in it together. The truth is, we weren't. Because while most people in this country were looking out for their neighbours, government ministers were looking out for their donors and contacts. Soon after Boris Johnson reluctantly agreed to the first lockdown, the government created a secret back channel that helped friends of the Conservative Party and other politically connected suppliers make millions of pounds out of PPE contracts. According to the National Audit Office, companies channelled into the so-called VIP lane were 10 times more likely to secure deals than companies without political connections. Meet Samir Jasal. He's a Conservative Party donor, Tory councillor and former advisor to Priti Patel. He's also an acquaintance of Boris Johnson, Theresa May and David Cameron. Now meet Surjit Shergill, Jasal's business partner. Last summer, Jasal and Shergill set themselves up as middlemen, working to land lucrative government PPE contracts for a company called Pharmaceuticals Direct. And they succeeded. We know the company landed at least 2 massive government deals worth £28.8 million and £102.6 million. Shergill was paid handsomely for securing the deals. Shergill's own company was valued at £200 when COVID first hit, but it was soon worth £10 million. And another company he owned invoiced Pharmaceuticals Direct £20 million for unspecified services. So the question is this: how did a Conservative donor and his business partner land these lucrative contracts? And in the process, how did at least one of them become a multi-millionaire? Let's start with this email from 27th of March 2020, 4 days after the first lockdown. Shergill is writing to one of Boris Johnson's closest aides, controversial Downing Street advisor Munira Mirza. Samir Jasal is copied in. Shergill asks Mirza to be put in touch with government procurement personnel and says,
"We are keen to support the party,"
that's the Conservative Party,
"and the nation through this turbulent time."
3 days later, Shergill writes to Mirza, again copying in Samir Jasal, saying,
"I really appreciate the assistance you have provided thus far, because I can see you have gone above and beyond for us in this situation."
3 days after that, he writes again to Mirza, saying,
"I just wanted to personally thank you for taking the time to speak to me over the past few days and ensure my emails were forwarded to the appropriate personnel."
Later that day, he wrote to a senior Cabinet Office official thanking him for speaking with Munira. There are then a series of emails, which we have copies of, between Shergill and Priti Patel, with Shergill writing to the Home Secretary to say, quote,
"As a result of your intervention, we are now in discussions to offer face masks."
A reminder, Shergill's partner, Samir Jasal, is a former aide to Priti Patel. Indeed, he describes her on social media as, quote, "a good friend." The following day, Patel wrote back to say she's contacted Michael Gove's Cabinet Office to draw
their attention to your email and to the products you can source. I have also forwarded the email to the Secretary of State for Transport for his department to consider as well.
6 days later, Pharmaceuticals Direct signed a £28.8 million deal with the government to supply 60 million face masks at a price significantly higher than the government's own internal benchmark price. The following month, Jasal and Shergill emailed Matt Hancock's health department to pitch for more business for Pharmaceuticals Direct, specifically to sell the government high-end FFP3 face masks. Jasal and Shergill quoted a price by email, then followed up with further emails and phone calls. We don't know what these emails said or who these phone calls were with, because the government refuses to tell us. Just 4 days later, the government recommended an £102.6 million deal to buy 20 million FFP3 masks from Pharmaceuticals Direct at £5.13 per mask. But we've seen an internal email from the Department of Health in which serious concerns are raised about that price.
This is well above the average we are currently paying of £2.69 per unit. The unit price for this deal looks too expensive, even in these circumstances. Can you please explore further price reductions and or justify to the AO,
the accounting officer,
why the price here is so much higher than the most recent deal?
The cost to the taxpayer between buying 20 million masks at £5.13 per mask and £2.69 per mask is about £50 million. The accounting officer is urged to greenlight the deal with Pharmaceuticals Direct and is told that the inflated price is justified because there is a current acute shortfall of the masks. So was the high price being asked for by Jasal and Shergill because the worldwide rush on masks was driving up the price? Apparently not, because we've seen an email dated just 4 days earlier from Hancock's health department to an alternative supplier who's offered to supply exactly the same masks. But that second company is told that their high-end FFP3 masks aren't needed because the government, quote,
now has sufficient supply arrangements in place to meet requirements over the coming months.
That second company isn't asked to beat Pharmaceutical Direct's inflated price. Indeed, the accounting officer is not even told there is a second company offering to provide the exact same product in the same quantities. Cheaper masks were potentially available, but for some reason, the government didn't explore that option and instead went for the ones being sold by a friend of Priti Patel. It's worth noting at this point that many well-established firms which lacked political connections have repeatedly complained that during the first wave of the crisis, when PPE was in desperately short supply, they were unable to get the attention of officials. But the system worked for some people. Good Law Project has evidence that Subjit Shergill charged Pharmaceuticals Direct £16.37 million plus VAT for his services as a middleman between the company and the government. So why did Priti Patel, Matt Hancock and Downing Street aide Munira Mirza bend over backwards to support Jassal and Shergill? Why were civil servants overruled when they raised concerns over the prices being charged? Why was the existence of a rival company offering to supply the same products in the same quantities ignored? The country deserves answers.